this moment, I'm not really crying about Eric at this exact moment. I cry about him a lot. That's not what this is. It's just seeing these people. This is really an amazing group of people. I mean, wow. So thank you very much for being here, all of these really overwhelmingly great group of people. All right. So with that, I want to say, please silence your phones so that when the people are talking, they're not interruptions. Thanks, David. Okay, thanks, Mary. I hid the iPad behind the curtain. So, it's funny, I feel like thanking people, like Mary Racine just like walked in here and started doing things to help me. Sophie helped me with so many things. I feel like, I'm now winning an award for most helped widow. But, Lisa, Emily, I mean, I'll stop now because I'll forget someone, but really people do step up in these moments and, including Andrew who said, oh, let's do it here and look at magic. It's kind of a nice place to do this. All right, so we turned off our phones. And the only other thing I wanted to tell everyone is that after the official, I invited them to speak people, there's going to be a little song, and then anyone who wants to say anything about Eric or share a thought or whatever gets to come up here. And so I just wanted to prepare you for that, and I'll let you know when that part comes. All right, so the order of speakers is, first up is going to be Joanne, Eric's sister, who probably most of you know. We're going to go in chronological order, so after that will be three of Eric's oldest and dearest friends, and that chronologically that will be Andrew, who knew him in high school and college, and then Ned, who met him on the first day of college, and then David, who met him around about that time, but not on that first day. So I think that's it, and because Joanne is going to introduce, I dug up, Eric was in a famous public service announcement, which a lot of you already know. But I had the only copy in the bottom of a box in a closet, and I transferred this. So another person I'd kind of like to thank is Suzanne Rostock, who helped make it actually showable to you. All right, thank you, everybody. And Joanne.
Wow. All I can say is it's unbelievably incredible to be here with so many people who loved Eric, and certainly there was every good reason on the planet to love him. I mean, there are people in this room who've known Eric since high school, and I guess I've known him the longest because I knew him for 72 years. And I was incredibly lucky to be Eric's sister. And, as we all know, it's wonderful to be here surrounded by all of you, but it would be a lot more wonderful and a lot more fun if Eric was here with us. That is for sure. And because a lot of us didn't get to see Eric all that often over the past couple of years, it's very easy to pretend that he's just up in Brewster resting his elbow, or he's in the other room somewhere, just, he's going to come in a few minutes. But the New York Times did publish his obituary a couple of weeks ago, so I guess we do have to admit that there's a very good reason that Eric isn't here today. So, like I said, he wasn't just my brother, he was my best friend. And he was a person that was always there for me, whether I had a problem that I need somebody to help me talk through, or whether I was celebrating a success. And Eric was often a lot more excited about my successes than I was, and he was an incredible cheerleader for all of us. And, he loved me so much, he loved Lola so much, he loved all of you in this room. And for a lot of us, too, I mean, sometimes Eric was like that Scarlett Johansson avatar in the movie Her, where he was just soothed our souls with his incredible sweetness and kindness and generosity. And he was there all the time, whether we saw him in person or not. You can just pick up the phone, call Eric. He was driving to the swimming pool. You could talk to him for an hour and a half in the car. He'd entertain you and amuse you with things you'd never even heard of in your life, and a lot of things that you may not have even understood, but Eric would do his best to explain them. And one of the things that I loved about Eric's Facebook page was the picture of Eric with a little duck on his shoulder that I think your daughter took, right, Sophie? And like, who else is going to have a picture of themselves on Facebook with a little Easter duck on their shoulder? But Eric had a group of friends on Facebook, and he wrote some really bizarre, weirdo things, because he was kind of a bizarre weirdo too. But like, I know you know this, but just in case you haven't been thinking about it lately, isn't it amazing how much the autumn leaves look like a bowl of tricks? Yeah, sure, Eric. Or let's accept reality and stop calling teaspoons teaspoons and start calling them coffee spoons. Okay, and then the last one. I know you're supposed to not want to have egg on your face, but how do we know we wouldn't kind of like it? So, oh God, I just miss him so much. We all do. I mean, really. So, I mean, the week after Eric died, I went to meditate and chill out in St. Thomas Church. I was going to meet my friend Linda at MoMA. She was running a little late. And as I was walking down the steps after meditating, I fell on the bottom step and broke my foot. And I had to spend a month hobbling around on crutches, and it gave me time to mourn, really. And it gave me a chance to think about how much Eric had had to think about every single move that he made on the planet Earth. So he had to think about how he was going to sit down at the table in a restaurant, how he was going to get up from the table, how he was going to get into the car. And because Eric was so charming and he never complained, he did it all with a smile. So we didn't even really have to think of it very much either, except for the fact that for Eric, it was a really real thing. And, you know, everyone in this room knows about hemophilia because they knew Eric. But my parents had never heard of hemophilia until Eric bit his tongue when he was 2 years old and couldn't stop bleeding. And the doctors in the hospital told my parents that he was never going to make it to 12 years of age, which turned out not to be true. But, you know, my father spent the majority of his life trying to prove the doctors wrong. And to a great extent, he did. You know, Eric might have told some of you that he was descended from the Romanovs, the Russian Romanovs, because it suited his persona, you know. And hemophilia was called the royal disease. And he did convince Tira and Rai to call him Lord Jim. So he managed to make that happen, too. But Eric's hemophilia turned out to be a genetic mutation that changed his life and changed my family's life forever. As a kid, Eric couldn't really do any physical sports, so he was the neighborhood champion hula hooper, and he would just stand there swiveling his hips like for hours at a time, smiling, pretending he was Elvis, you know. And he was a kick-ass poker player, a pool shark, unbelievable pool player. And, you know, he also, he played classical piano by ear, and if you walked by our living room in Great Neck, you were never really sure if it was Eric or Dino Lupati on vinyl playing the piano, because he was an incredible musician. And Eric's focus and concentration were really unrivaled. And he was brilliant, and many of his best friends that he met in high school and college were equally brilliant. And the kids in high school, everybody would hang out at our house at 10 Stephen Lane, sitting around philosophizing, smoking dope. And my mother would always walk around going, "Who's burning rope in there?" And I don't know if she ever figured out what was going on. But, Billy was pretty smart, so I don't know. But Eric's life wasn't always fun. Because when he was a little kid, he had these horrible metal and leather braces on his legs and his arms, and really he was always in pain. He didn't let on that he was always in pain, but he was always in pain. And our father ran the TV syndication unit at MCA, but his main joy in life was really being the chairman of the Hemophilia Foundation, and he made it his life's work to discover a prophylactic treatment for hemophilia. So he financed research with hemophiliac dogs, and then he raised the money to pay for the research at Highland Laboratories, where they spun factor VIII out of whole blood, so Eric didn't have to go to the hospital several times a week for blood transfusions. And he was the first kid to be able to take the concentrate, factor VIII. And Eric, the summer that he was 15, when he had been taking factor VIII for a few months, was able to go to the hospital for special surgery, throw away his braces, and walk down the aisle at my wedding without the braces for the first time. And he generated a lot more attention than I did, and it was, and I had a wedding dress on. But it was totally well-deserved. It was just amazing. And then after that, Eric's life started getting a lot better. I mean, he was able to show up at school and go to high school, graduating first in his class. And he was able to go to Harvard. And he met a number of you there. And then he traveled across the country. And he had amazing friends and women friends who he lived with in California and in Rome and in New York. And then the summer that he was still in Harvard, my parent and Eric, because he was my little brother, he was still my annoying little brother, and I loved him dearly. But my parents were like, "Hey, Eric has to drive back from California to New York, so will you go fly across the country and drive back with him?" And I was like, "Oh, Jesus, I really have to do that?" But then I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that." And Eric and I bonded traveling across Canada and fell madly in love with each other, and we just told the stupidest jokes about everybody in our family. But, from then on, Eric really was my best friend forever. And when Eric was 22 years old, he and Lou went to Washington, and they lobbied for the Hemophilia Act. And because Lou was carrying a huge bag with all of Eric's braces in a golf bag, and, showed all the senators the torture chambers that Eric had lived in for his whole childhood. And then Eric infused himself with factor VIII and, showed the senators what it meant to be a hemophiliac, to actually be freed of the braces that Lou had carried with him. And it was just enormous, because after that, there were clinics for hemophiliacs open all over the country. And it was a very expensive drug, but the government paid for it. And it wasn't just Eric who was the one that could get factor VIII anymore. It was all hemophiliacs. And in the commercial that you're going to see in a minute, basically, everybody in our family at the time worked on that commercial. Fred, who I was married to, convinced Jerry Delafamina and Bob Giraldi, and it wasn't all that hard to convince them, to do a series of PSAs, and Eric became the spokesperson for hemophilia. Lou was able to get the spot syndicated on almost every television station across the country. It aired many, many, many times. And, some of you, I'm sure, remember Eric's face was plastered on buses, on subways, just about everywhere. And I found out recently, actually, that there's a fan club for Eric and the hemophiliacs online. So in a minute, we're going to see that commercial and see Eric. And all I can say is I was unbelievably lucky to have him as my brother. And he was awesome, as we all know.
was lucky. They picked me to test it out on. And for a year, I've been living and bleeding like a normal person. But getting it to the thousands of other people who need it is another story. It's very expensive. The only way they're going to get it is if you give it to them. We need your money. We're so close, yet so far.
Yay, Eric.
Yeah! Hi, I'm Andrew, or Andy Hayward. Allison, thank you so much for having us all here today. We're going to try to make some slides work remotely here. Let's take a look and see if we can do that. All right, we'll see what happens. Okay, thank you for inviting us. It's wonderful to see old friends, meet new ones. I'm sorry it's under such sad circumstances, but it is a celebration as well. You know, at most memorials, it's customary to exaggerate the virtues of the person who's being eulogized. If you're not going to do it then, when are you going to do it? But here I'm afraid of the opposite, that we can't actually do justice to one of the few truly extraordinary characters I've ever known and the extraordinary friends I've ever had. I think of the world as divided into two kinds of people, fun generators and fun consumers, or for the business majors in the room, net fun generators and net fun consumers. Well, Eric Friedland, as Joanne explained so beautifully, had every possible excuse to be a net fun consumer. Who would have blamed him? And instead, he was the ultimate fun generator, net and gross fun generator, raising the spirits of every room that he strode into with his unique gait and infectious enthusiasm for life. You have to give credit to his family. His mother, Billy, was an accomplished painter. His father, Lou, was a pioneering TV executive. Joanne alluded to it. As Allison put it the other day, Eric's dad invented the rerun. Think about that. His whip-smart, funny, beautiful sister, my friend Joanne, whom you just met, and even his dog, Kelty, an Irish terrier who Joanne claims walked over to the door and said, "Out!" in a very gravelly voice, "Out!" whenever he wanted to leave the house. At the Friedlands, even the dog was really smart. Anyway, wherever it came from, Eric grew up with an oversupply of curiosity, creativity, and humor, and an amazing gift for friendship. This room is testimony to all of that. All right, here's where we try technology. There we go. I knew Eric for more than 50 years. As teenagers, we watched the first moon landing together on July 21st, 1969, at his house at 10 Stephen Lane in Kings Point. Oops, sorry. Reflecting on that and so many other moments I spent with Eric, I wondered whether he himself was sent from some alternative universe, an alternate universe with the mission to make people on Earth happier. It's a pretty good theory if you think about it. Didn't he always make you feel like the only person in the room, maybe the only person in the world? He was amazing at that. Certainly the only person who mattered at that moment. And I'll bet many, if not most of the people here shared a set of running gags with Eric. They created an intimacy that was born of your relationship and his unique ability to focus on you, gags that you would just use with him year after year and share. Eric and I found out at some point that we'd both been struck by a particular exhibit at the New York World's Fair in 1964 and 1965. It was called Progress Land. Yeah, a Disney-designed experience at the massive General Electric Pavilion. The theme song, which was written by Disney songwriters, the Shermans, "There's a great big beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day." What can I tell you? It was a different time. Anyway, what really got to me and Eric was a new technology called audio animatronics, life-sized figures that would move and talk in a bizarre approximation of human motion and speech. A rotating theater propelled visitors through a series of living room scenes depicting the benefits of electricity through the decades. Every scene had a dad and a dog. Eric developed, if you look closely, you'll see the dog on the floor there. Eric developed an uncanny imitation of the display. His unique physique, which Joanne told us about, made him resemble an audio animatronic creature himself. And he milked that for all it was worth, even adding a subtle hissing sound to seem more like a robot. I can't do it justice, but I'm going to try. So the dog would go, "Woof, woof," and then Eric would say, Don't bark at the nice people, Scout. They're our friends, and friends of General Electric. I made Eric do that imitation again and again for years. I wish I could see it again today. All right, so, oops, I went 2 slides. That's our high school. We went to the same high school, Great Neck North. He was #1 in our class, and as Joanne described so well, the uncrowned king of the artsy set, which probably explains why I didn't really get to know him too well in high school. But I was lucky enough to live right near him, right near his dorm, Hollis Hall, in college, and we became very close, even though he was still a lot artsier and hipper than I was. Sometime during our second winter, I think it was, and Joanna can check me on this later, he dropped out, ostensibly because of the treacherous and slippery Cambridge, Massachusetts sidewalks. They were pretty awful in the winter, and they were, in fact, very dangerous for him, no question about it. But in thinking about it, I think college would have been wasted on him. Too big a brain, too big a heart, too much real life to tackle without knowing how much time he had to do it. Eric was a very sexy guy, and I think he knew it. One time we were at his house in Kings Point, and Eric was scratching his dog, aforementioned Kelty, behind the ears. He said to me, "Giving pleasure to an animal is almost as rewarding as giving pleasure to a woman." He was 18 years old at the time. My reaction was, yeah, I guess if you say so. When his dad, Lou, died in 2005, there was a group of women, each more compelling than the next, all in a row at the memorial, Eric's exes, or at least some of them, a subset. Of course, nobody could compare to his perfect soulmate, Allison, and he knew it right away. He knew it right away, but she wasn't in on the joke quite so soon. As you can imagine, even meeting her now, when Allison was in her mid-20s, she had options. Eric launched a full-throated campaign to convince her that, as he put it to me later, he was the right caveman for her. And was he ever? The fun generator found his match, and Eric found happiness on Blaney Road in Brewster. Bourbon, brunch, barbecues, ridiculously early dinners. I joked about calling before 4 p.m. so as not to interrupt their evening meal. And romantic getaways to anywhere their wheels and their wanderlust would take them. New York City, too, of course. Eric once insisted that Allison and I try the red wine at his favorite Chinese restaurant, Wajil, near their apartment on the Upper East Side. It was the worst red wine we'd ever had. Allison and I teased him about it for years, another one of those running jokes that felt strictly our own. Eric and Allison also somehow managed to see every movie. One day they asked me whether I'd seen a Ron Howard movie called Rush, came out 10 years ago, about the rivalry between two Formula One drivers, James Hunt of the UK and an Austrian racing legend named Niki Lauda, L-A-U-D-A. It starred Chris Hemsworth, later went on to be Thor, as Hunt, and an actor named Daniel Brühl as Lauda. As soon as I saw the film, I knew the reason why they wanted me to see it. I have a feeling you see it too. Between the overbite and the charisma, the resemblance between the Niki Lauda character and Eric was unmistakable. And if you check out the real Niki Lauda, it's even more striking. From then on, I called Eric from then on, right till the end, I called Eric Ricky, as in Ricky Lauda. R-I-K-I was our spelling of it, or sometimes Rick Friedland. And he went along for the ride, of course. That was just for laughs, but as I think about it, the resemblance wasn't just physical. Eric was every bit as brave in his life, every bit as odds-defying as a Formula One driver's. Although he was so stoical, exactly as Joanne said, underplaying his pain so as not to inflict pain on others, you would never know it from talking to him. I'm really going to miss the phone calls. Eric on his Android phone. Android. Think about it. In the earlier, less reliable days of cell phones, we had a rule. If the call dropped twice, we would say goodbye prophylactically as soon as the connection was reestablished a third time, and then just keep talking so that when we got cut off again, we could comfortably give up until next time. The calls got better and longer, and just when I thought we'd exhausted every possible subject and was about to hang up, Eric would say, "Do you have time for one more topic?" Sound familiar? Man, that voice, that bark of a laugh that made you feel so much funnier and more perceptive than you actually were. If you read Allison's beautiful obit, you know he had 6 more decades with Eric than he or we who loved him had any right to expect. What an amazing connection for all of us in this room to have spent some of those years in the otherworldly orbit of this one-of-a-kind, never-to-be-replicated creature. Wherever he came from, thank God he landed among us. Don't bark at the nice people, Scout. They're our friends and friends of Eric Friedland. How lucky are we? Thank you. And speaking of friends, thank you. Speaking of friends, it's my great pleasure to introduce a friend of mine and Eric's from college, Ned Claflin.
That wasn't bad at all. However, can you hear me? Okay. He neglected to mention one thing that I remember from in the 70s. Eric called me up, and Andy was working down at a local television station in New York, and the McWhirter twins, identical twins who ran the Guinness Book of World Record, were in town at the TV station and hyping their new edition of whatever it was, Guinness, edition 75 or whatever. And my impression from what I remember was that Andy called Eric and said, "Look, Eric, you're the fastest talking guy in the world. And do you know the Hamlet soliloquy?" Eric said, "Yes." And well, get on down here because you break the world record in front of the McWhirter twins. Do you remember the story, Allison? Oh, this is great. No, I'm the only guy making every word of this up. And what I remember was that he drove into town, whatever the 45 minutes, whatever it was, lowering the window and going, practicing, give him the money. And he went down and he destroyed the world record. Right? And the McWhirters were used to people not breaking the world record and having to watch them. And what I recall was that the expressions changed. I'm not a good face actor, but, it was a 31-second, and he broke it by about 5 seconds. And of course, Andy knew you were cheating. Right? I got somebody in my back pocket. Anyway, when I think of Eric, there's always the images. I didn't know there'd be a slideshow, but recite after me. The buck teeth, right? The fingers with their slightly odd curve when he extended them. Does everybody remember that? That particular look. The slightly bulbous nose. Refer to Maker. The slightly crossed eyes. I didn't hear those mentioned. You remember that when he's really staring at you? And the long and hopelessly slender legs. I remember his blue jeans. They weren't worn at the knees the way all of ours were back when it was cool to have wash your jeans 100 times and get them. Because he couldn't bend his knees as easily as we could, so he had those one-of-a-kind, immaculate, perfectly evenly worn blue jeans. You remember the no bump at the knee? It's like, how did he do it? The green apples, the Heinekens, right? And the to-go food. And I think because we're taking a lot of time, I do remember Allison Denny coming to the Hamptons with some Indian food while Eric and I were socializing as the men that we were, right? And she looked at me and said, "You're a couch potato. Sit on the couch and eat your potato." And, of course, there's the voice, right? And there are the superlatives always with Eric, the fastest talking human on earth, the fastest talking humanoid on earth, the patient who made medical history, the highest non-castrato male voice. I'm kidding, of course, right? jamming the most subjects and details into one conversation of anyone on Earth, right? There are the idiosyncrasies. The 13 obsession, any of you familiar with this? You might remember having to sit in his car until no combination of numbers on the digital clock added up to 13. Driving back and forth, waiting. And there was the white light, that was what he called his white BMW. And he had a pink and green business card made for it that read, "Nothing travels faster except your mind." There was elbow rest, right? He's still resting his elbow somewhere. And there was the Dolly Parton obsession. Remember that? I've seen blank faces, but not in the front. Then the Mitsuko Uchida obsession, and there was Allison Denny. And we are so grateful to her for her everything she did today and for 35 years of unique love and devotion. And I would not mind if you would stand for a second and honor her. Thank you. But what resemblance she has physically to Dolly Parton or Mitsuko Uchida is beyond this particular witness. Right? Still, with these idiosyncrasies, I saw over and over again that strangers always accepted him as a normal person. And it's just astonishing to watch him put people at ease immediately with his shining glow and his almost religiously profound and heartfelt courtesy. And when I think of anything with Eric, that is the thing I think the most about, is the 19th century style courtesy. I've never seen anyone like that. And how about the amount of loyalty he had for all of us? For those children of ours who were lucky enough to know him, was anyone ever a kinder or more supportive and wonderfully tactful friend to them as they grew up? I see some of those faces here today. And you can ask them what it meant to have Eric in their life. And you can ask any of us old campaigners who were lucky enough to live in the enchanted wonderland of Great Neck that he, his sister Jo, and his spectacular parents, Billy and Lou, built for all of us. I'm sure Eric has a world record for most words spoken in a lifetime. Does anybody want to come back? But did anyone ever hear him say, "Nobody knows the troubles I've seen"? Even though it was as true for him as it was for anybody who ever sang it, right? Just nothing but great cheer and unbounded joy and enthusiasm for our experiences of things that he would never be able to do. The last things I'll mention seem to epitomize him to me. 10 years ago, I drove across the country to California at a leisurely pace, about 400 miles a day. Every day, Eric and I spoke on the phone. This is not surprising to many of you, right? And Eric would have prepared his recommendations for where he thought I might like to eat, no matter how obscure the locale. He did it with careful attention to my food preferences, which are somewhat dog-like, right? And fastidious examination of photos of the food at Javier's Bistro in South Bend, Indiana, and Ray's Tavern in Green River, Utah. These are places he would never have a chance to go. And the last one happened in the 1980s. Excuse me. I was flying to Italy from JFK, and Eric wasn't coming along, but he drove me down there, probably in the white light, right? And walked with me out to my TWA departure gate to say goodbye, as we used to do occasionally in that age of innocence. There we were at the gate, chatting in a jolly way, when the PA address made the final call. I was the last person aboard, so I gave the attendant my boarding pass, and Eric, no boarding pass, ambled with me down the walkway to the plane. With the attendant's apparent blessing, we both got on board. This is continuing our conversation. Well, the flight attendants, all women, if I recall. You back me up on that, right, Andy? We're hovering in the galley. Eric, as usual, charmed the attendants without trying. They joined in the merriment, and they all decided he should go along with us. It's absolutely true. He protested he didn't have a ticket, but they shooed that away. That's a detail. Then one of them closed the door. Eric bubbled over in an explosion of smiling courtesy to insist that someone open the door and let him back out. He barely escaped with his life. No security gate, no ticket, right? No boarding pass, no luggage, no factor 8 prophylactic medicine, nothing. Right? He couldn't possibly have gone. But those flight attendants knew what all of us knew. What is an international flight or a journey of any kind, or springtime when, as his father Lou used to say, the churds are burping? Or for that matter, what is any sunny day without Eric Friedland?
Here's my face. Take the mic out of the mic holder. There's it working? Yes, okay. Citizens of Friedlandia. There's too much to say about Eric Friedland, and there isn't enough time to say it. So I have streamlined 8 little pieces of storytelling. I'll be talking for longer than 3 minutes. I won't be talking forever, so it'll be somewhere in between 3 minutes and forever. And I'm going to give you the outline now of the items I will be covering so you can keep track of where we are in the story and know that I'm living up to my word. I'm going to start with brief opening remarks, and then I will go into 4 points, essential points of my journey of my relationship with Eric, which will be 1, origin story, 2, hanging, or, tripping the like fantastic with the love star, 3, conflict, 4, saying goodbye. Then I will finish with some brief closing remarks, then a joke that Eric would love, and then the last thing I'll do, and this is point 8, would be a brief imitation of Eric Friedland. So, between 3 minutes and forever, that's what that's going to take. Before I go into the Eric love, I have to give you a little Dave love. This is the first public event for me in 4 years plus. I might have become a little feral. If I do something inappropriate, if I jump up on you and lick your face in an inappropriate way, I'm basically a good dog, and I can follow instructions, and if you tell me how you like me to lick your face, I can probably accommodate you there. I'm in my 13th year of taking care of our mother who just turned 100, so I can't do the COVID casual thing. That's why I have to wear a mask, because I got to go right back and take care of her. So I'm sorry, I would love to be meeting people face to face, especially all these people I don't know. Sorry I have to do mask to face. What are you going to do? And the other thing was my doctor recently told me it's time to get hearing aids. I haven't had a chance to get them yet. Mom and I just had this cold for 2 weeks. So really deaf, especially in this ear. So if I'm not responsive, please get my attention, come around in front of me. You can touch me to get, if I don't, okay, so the Eric love now. Brief opening remarks. I'm partial to nicknames. You know, okay, I have friends, we have nicknames. Not everybody, but some. With Eric, I had so many nicknames for him. Richard, King Richard, Little Richie Rich, Freaky, Free. I think my brother Peter might have made up one or two of those. Little Richie Rich boy. This last year or two, I somehow, King Richard, I somehow worked in Roberto and Robert and maybe even a Bob. I don't remember what the rationale was, but I had one. I presented it to Eric. He enthusiastically embraced it. But mostly I called him Ricky or Rick. But so many nicknames, and maybe it's because there was so much to the guy. You just had to, there weren't enough names to call him to. Anyway, brief opening remarks. Origin story. Amy Beth Chasen is the first person I ever had sex with. I was a sophomore at Oberlin, and that first semester, and that was also to be my last semester at Oberlin. She was a fresh woman, or as we called them then, refreshments, and so I was visiting her in Great Neck, and she wanted me to come with her into the city and meet this guy Eric Friedland, and she raved about her friend Eric Friedland, and I was not happy about that. I was so painfully insecure and just inexperienced with, I didn't know if this was ever gonna happen again with me having sex with a woman. I assumed we were gonna get married because, so when she's raving about this guy Eric Friedland, I'm really not into it, and she wants to take me into the city and meet him. Really, no, I mean, the last thing I wanted to do in the world. So we're going in from Great Neck, get to Penn Station, go up the escalator, and there's this tall, thin, kind of strange-looking guy. And it might have been 2 minutes, but I'm going to say in the first minute, I went from most thing I don't want to do in the world to having the time of my life with this guy. I had a better time with him than I did with Amy. That night, Amy and I blew up sometime within the next year. Eric and I were rolling for 50 years plus. So that's my Eric origin story. I go hang out with him in Great Neck, and it was remarkable how, people have touched on this, just how better you felt, how better life was. And I would leave, and I go, this has to do with being with Eric, but it's not him alone. I'm the person who's experiencing the thing. So if I can feel this much better with him, why can't I access this to at least some degree myself? Because I'm part of this thing that's happening of feeling better. So finally, 50 plus years later, in the last year or two, I finally feel like I'm getting there. That of experiencing that kind of feeling on my own. But I'm just telling you, it was a direction that was given to me as a gift from my relationship with Eric as the starting point of, so that was a really significant thing for me. Conflict. Not a perfect guy. If you ever had the privilege of being in a car with him with two other people and driving into the city and you're going to try to choose a restaurant, and he's trying to be solicitous of everybody to the point where you can never decide to go anywhere. And even after everyone's made concessions and we're going to go here, he goes back to an earlier thing of, are you sure you don't want to? And you just wanted to kill him. I even asked him one time what was up with that. And I think he sincerely was trying to be solicitous, I don't know, or just sort of demonically funny, There was a time on Stephen Lane in that bathroom in the bedroom hallway where I was screaming at him for something, I don't remember what. Mostly, we didn't fight a lot, but he was a formidable guy. We mostly fought during a period when I was into Naomi Klein, and he was more conservative politically than he ended up being, and I was reading The Shock Doctrine, and he hated Naomi Klein, and we would talk on the phone forever, and I had pages and pages and pages of notes to try to convince him, and I would get so mad at him. I think I screamed on the phone at him louder than I have at anybody ever in my life. And here's the reason I'm saying all this, is I often have said, you don't really know how solid your relationship is until it gets shitty. And when it would get shitty with Eric, he would come back so strong like the next day or something, and just, to make connection again, and being humble about it, and whatever his part, and I would be humble too, and we would just get right back together like immediately. And it just, that was another extraordinary thing about him. For the fourth of this part, is the saying goodbye. I'd leave Great Neck, and after doing this a bunch of times, I hated it because it wasn't appropriate the way we said goodbye. We would just say goodbye and I would drive off. And at the end of this part, I'm going to make a really loud noise, so get ready for that. So Eric and I came up, it wasn't appropriate. It didn't match how you felt emotionally, how it was psychologically. So we created this way of saying goodbye, which I think has helped me now, because I got to say goodbye to him so many times this way. So he made up this part, where we start off with being two sort of lower-class British guys, and we're out there in the driveway, and he's the dad, and I'm the son, and we take forever to say nothing, but it would go like, well, Dad? Yes, son? Dad? Right, well, goodbye, son. So long, Dad. We just do this forever. Saying nothing, but taking a really long time doing it. And it was really poignant. And then I'd get in the car and open the window, and he would, and wherever he was, and then as I was driving away, as loud as I could for as long as I could till I was out of sight, no! And that was right. That was right, because you didn't want to go, and you felt it strongly. So, I don't know whether that will help you, but you might want to try it. Closing remarks. See how I'm moving along here? Closing remarks. Early on, I had this dream with Eric that I wanted us, because we were so fucking funny together, I wanted us to be in our 80s and eating at a restaurant and having cute waitresses come up and us being so fucking funny together and blowing the waitress's mind, and we were going to be in our 80s. And I didn't get to do that with him. But in the last year, we had a phone conversation, and we were funny in different ways at different times. But on this one particular phone conversation, and I don't remember at all what the subject matter was, but we did a dry thing back and forth, and a dry and an absurd thing back and forth that went on for so long, and it was so creative. It just kept on going, and so dry, and it was a life event. It was mind-blowing, and I got high from it. And afterwards, like in the next time I talked to him, I remarked on it because it was so extraordinary. Stiller and Mira, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, whoever you want. This was way up with anybody and or beyond. And I told him that I got high from that, and he had experienced the same thing. So I didn't get to do the 80-year-old man thing, but I had that in the last year with him, and I'm taking that. So the joke that Eric would love. I can't swear this is true, but I'm pretty sure Eric witnessed me doing this joke while performing. I'm sure he loved it, since he was a record setter. So we're going to set the record tonight. The premise is setting the record wherever you are of the biggest group Edward G. Robinson imitation. So this is going to be the biggest, for the Harvard Club of New York, the biggest group Edward G. Robinson imitation that has ever been. And I'm thinking this record is going to hold. And so the way it works is I do a bad Edward G. Robinson imitation, and then I go, we'll get you out, Bugsy, mwah. And I'll say that, and then you all go, yeah, mwah. And it doesn't matter what you do. It's just we all do it together and we set the record. So here we go. So we'll get you out, Bugsy, mwah. 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 Record set. Record set. Okay, and for my final, and this is so Erician that I'm going to do this. He would think this is so funny. There was one summer, he got really excited because he'd seen on the news something about a seagull that doesn't exist here called Ross's gull, and there's something distinctive about it. And then he was at the beach, and he happened to run into this gull that he'd heard about on the news. And there it was, and there was Eric. And so Eric would do this imitation of Ross's gull, and this was it. And he'd just go, oh. Oh. Thanks for your kind indulgence.
All right, well, thank you so far, you guys. This is really great, what everyone's been saying about Eric. All right, now we're going to have a musical interlude. This was a special request of mine, and I feel I may have put these people on the spot, but I really, Eric loved the group The Baltimores, and I'm going to cry. It's hard to not cry about this stuff, but anyway, Eric loved Ned Claflin, and Tom Nelson were part of this group, an a cappella group called the Baltimores. And I really think one of the great joys of Eric's life was he got to kind of pal around with you guys, and sometimes like Eric was a very, very, very good singer. And he'd sometimes like sit in a little. So they're not gonna do a Baltimore song because they don't have the whole cast of characters. But the two of them are just kind of, you guys can introduce it yourself, but thank you for indulging me. They're gonna come just sing something for you. And then anyone who has something else to say about Eric can pop up and do that.
Now, we haven't sung together in 40 years, and Tom and I only ever knew one song.
We did it for Eric.
We certainly did it for Eric.
We did it for Eric.
Right, so that means Tom.
Yeah.
Sing with the strings of my heart. Sorry. Sing with the strings of my heart. Your eyes made sky seem blue again. What else can I do again? But keep repeating through and through, I love you. But keep repeating through and through, I love you. And I love you. Zing with the strings, dooby-doo-bop. Zing with the strings, dooby-doo-bop. Zing with the strings, dooby-doo-bop. Zing with the strings, Doo-be-doo-bop, sing with the strings, doo-be-doo-bop. Sing with the strings, doo-be-doo-bop, sing with the strings of my heart. Whoa, sing!
Would anyone like to say anything about Eric? Come on, Jennifer, Tom, Cousin George. Anyone, you know, but those three can start and we can just do whatever we want.
Wow. Thank you. On? Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Ned, Tom, awesome. My name is Jennifer Kelty Tobin Haydock. Like most of you here, if not all of you, I have very many precious memories of Eric, but I will only trouble you with two. The first time I went to Great Neck in 1983, I believe, Eric showed me a bunch of Super 8 movies from his childhood. Trust me, as Ned is fond of saying, they were fantastic. There were a few that Lou took of the family dog Kelty, an Irish Terrier. Joanne told me was right. What I remember most of those films was of Kelty running behind at fast pace the family car, and I don't know who was driving because I know that Lou was filming. Anyway, after that visit, I sent Eric, Billy, and Lou a thank you note when my return address simply read Jennifer Kelty Tobin. Pretty much from that day forward, certain people know me only as Kelty. Fast forward a few years. Eric, Allison, and I took a trip to the Adirondacks and stayed at the Lake Placid Manor. We sat on the grand porch, ate in the dining room, and even swam in the frigid waters of Lake Placid. This past summer, Eric reminded me via text message when we were reminiscing about that epic trip to the manor that our legs turned red, all caps were his, and that we, his words, discussed life itself on the veranda, and that I paid only $25 for my suite. He went on to remind me that it was only because, quote, he was more involved with their brochures and discounts and stuff. I'll bet that explains the pricing, end of quote. That was the trip when I knew Eric had found his person in Allison. I marveled at the way the two of you worked in such harmony with each other. Thank you, Allison, for everything you gave to Eric for all those years. The last thing I want to say is that being a Scorpio, I can tend to lean toward the darker side of things at times. Eric was the only person I know who always, all caps mine, left me feeling uplifted and full of his love and light. His joy at living was contagious. And for me, it was holy. I miss him every single day. Thank you, Air.
Hello, I'm Allison's brother, Tom, and my father is in a bed in Maryland. He's 97, and he wanted to share a few words about Eric with you guys. He says, Eric was certainly one of the most remarkable individuals I've ever met. I was impressed by his positivity. I don't recall ever hearing a disagreeable or contentious word about anybody, and this is very unusual in human conduct. It was always enjoyable to be with Eric and speak with him. His great sense of humor and vast knowledge of many topics made it comfortable and rewarding to be in his presence. And I'd like to personally say, Eric helped me through many, many times. And he was like an unpaid therapist. I probably owe you something, Allison. It's very funny because he loved to be a tour guide for everybody. And the one thing I can tell you he did wrong, he told me to go to the Madonna Ranch in California. Don't go there. It's no longer cool. Some of you saw the slideshow, and there were 2 white Scions. I don't know if you all know, but he loved his car so much that he hunted down a used car with less miles and changed into his newer used Scion, which is ridiculous. He and I would spend, a lot of time on the phone, and he called me Tom Bellino. He's the only one who's ever called me that, and don't start, please. But he and I agreed at some point in the last year or two that we love cutting each other off, and it never hurts our feelings. And not many people can do that, because I want to be, when I'm speaking, I don't want you cutting me off. But Eric could do it. And, I want to say a big shout out to my sister, who's just had, so many things to take care of, and you've really rocked, Allison. I'm so glad for you that you're getting through what's a horrible experience without coming apart. So I think I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be long-winded. Thank you. Oh, I recommended he see Rush, okay? I was the one. It's true.
I wonder if this light works. No, of course not. For those of you, if you could hear me, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cousin George. And by the way, that story about the Madonna Inn, Eric told me about that. I lived in Los Angeles for a while, made it up the coast, went to the Madonna Inn, and why would Eric tell me to go there? Go to the men's room. When you walk into the men's room, you're looking for the urinal. You can't find it until you break a certain light beam, and all of a sudden you hear the rumbling of motors, and a huge waterfall would appear on one wall. I was so impressed by that I lowered my zipper and did my business. And just as I get started, wouldn't you know it, the door opens and 3 little old ladies come in because they heard about the waterfall. Well, I first got to know my cousin Eric when I was 17. My family had just moved from Chicago a year and a half after my father passed away. My mom wanted to be with her family, and I got to meet my Uncle Lou, Aunt Billy, my Aunt Joan, my Aunt Betty, and that first year was really, I didn't know anybody. And I practically lived at my Uncle Lou's house. They had a garden apartment in Bayside before they moved to Kings Point, and it was a 20-minute bike ride from our apartment in Fresh Meadows, Queens. So I spent an awful lot of time with Eric. I didn't know a soul, and he really was my first real friend, even though he was almost 10 years my junior. So Eric was not only my cousin, but as I say, my best first friend. And I soon realized that my cousin was really a very unique kid. He lived a very protective life because his disease would never allow him to play sports, because an injury, of course, would send him to the emergency room. So we played board games, watched a lot of TV, and he would sit and watch me when I did my homework, always asking questions. And matter of fact, I think once or twice he helped me with some of the questions. So it didn't take long to realize that Eric was really a very smart kid. He also had a photographic memory, which was really quite amazing. And he could listen to a song, and later, living in Kings Point, where they had a piano, I remember the Sgt. Pepper album came out, the Beatles album. It was magnificent. We would listen to it, and he would walk over to the piano and actually start to play. Never had a lesson. Never had a lesson. He really had some unique talents. So as a young boy going to grammar school, they had a show and tell. And I had a collection of little metal dinosaurs. And he knew I had it because I showed it to him. We talked about it. We talked a lot about the early planets. Science was my thing, and I would always talk to Eric about whatever I just learned or read. So at school, he brought the dinosaurs for the show and tell, and he went on and on explaining how they, inhabited the planet and how they met an untimely death with a meteor that caused this total planet darkness. And about the next day, my Uncle Lou got a phone call from one of the teacher of the class. And he said to Lou, if Eric continues to show his intelligence to the class, he's never going to be able to make any friends. But as I look around the room today, that really wasn't a problem. Well, my uncle did everything he could to normalize Eric's life. And Eric's life was never going to be normal. But as a child, they went to Washington, D.C. They petitioned the government for funding, research, and financing for the Hemophilia Foundation. And Eric, of course, as you saw, was the poster boy for the charity. And he appeared on TV and print advertising. He was on buses. You saw his picture everywhere. And he was a willing guinea pig, which I thought was really amazing. A willing guinea pig for every new plasma derivative that was developed for his disease. Now, I can't remember how many times I accompanied them to hospitals, doctor's appointments, treatments, and therapies. And, the braces that he wore, the first ones were metal braces. He really had trouble walking. He couldn't bend his knees. His left arm was kind of frozen in one position. And the only exercise that he could do was to swim. And I remember one of the doctors was able to fabricate fiberglass braces for him. And they had a membership at a pool club in, I forget. Oh, in Manhasset. Yes. And so there was Eric in the pool swimming. I mean, this was actually his only exercise, and one of the things that throughout his whole life gave him the most joy and freedom. He could move through the water better than he could move on land, truly. So it wasn't unusual, actually, when the family went out to a restaurant for a meal, and we'd have to immediately get up, leave in the middle of a meal to rush to an emergency room because Eric would get a nosebleed. So no, Eric's life was really never normal. But as we all know, he made the best of it, had the weirdest sense of humor, I have to tell you. And of course, I and the family will miss him dearly. Thank you.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Am I heard? Okay. Dear Eric, I fondly and now sadly recall our many afternoon gatherings in your Upper East Side apartment. About a year or so after we first met, you mentioned that your afternoons were often free, therefore a splendid time to be social. And and I said, goody, let's plan something, a get-together, an afternoon hootenanny. And you told me that you were not a fan of extensive planning, preferring spur-of-the-moment get-togethers. That way, our stories and gossip would be fresh, uninhibited by a feeble need to fill our time with idle chatter. Saying stuff just to say it because we had to say something, because we had made plans. I said, okay, when I find myself on the Upper East Side, I'll give you a call from the corner and head on over. And you said, okay, but to be completely spontaneous, you must give me at least 2 weeks warning. And never, ever, ever call if the numbers on any digital clock within 5 minutes adds up to 13. And he gave examples. 12:01, 2:11, and the dreaded 3:37. And so we, all of us, you, me, and Allison, met quite often for our planned, spontaneous gathering. And now that my eyes are calloused from crying, and my heart skips a beat when I think of you and realize you're gone, I wish, oh how I wish, my dear, sweet, lit from within friend, oh how I wish for just one more planned, spontaneous meeting.
Hi, I'm Julie Bessinen, and in 1990, I was a waitress with $3,000 to my name, and Allison and Eric came in for dinner one night, and I was waiting on their table, and we were already friends. They weren't just random customers. And they had just returned from a trip to Las Vegas, and they raved about this new hotel called The Mirage, and it just opened, and Eric talked about every detail, and he was so impressed with this hotel, and he said, I bought stock in it. And so Eric, his enthusiasm was infectious, and the next day, I put all $3,000 I had into Mirage stock. And I called Eric and told him what I'd done, and he was horrified. And it made him so nervous and anxious and guilty. But then the stock tripled, and I sold it. And Eric was really relieved. And I said, where do I put this money now? And he became my financial advisor. And he decided we should form a company, which we did. And it was called Juggernaut. And Eric was the chairman of the board. And he never charged me a commission. And until this year, through this summer, he still told me about which stocks. He called me every single time he bought a stock. And he never sold a stock. He only bought. And so every once in a while, I would still follow his advice when I could. And Eric would say, I think this is the company that's going to get us that villa in the south of France. That was his dream. And so I know Joanne said he might be in Brewster nursing his elbow, but I would like to think he is enjoying his riches and living it up in his villa in the south of France.
Well, thank you, bonus people. That was some bonus talking, man. This is sort of really an amazing thing. So I really thank everyone who came and all these people who said, I mean, whatever. We made a videotape, which I'm really happy. I'll put it up in a folder and people can see it. So I think I'm just going to thank you again for coming. I'm just going to say one thing, and then I'm going to send you back to chat and have more snacks. But I just want to say, I feel like, it was actually sort of a tough decision to get together with Eric, because I knew he was going to be kind of a pain in the neck. Like, he was great. And at some point I decided, well, it's worth it. And I'm just so glad I did, because it really was worth it. And I always felt so grateful. Like, as we're saying, sometimes he would say, oh, my elbow's hurting, you can't come over. But he didn't say that to me. So I really feel like I got the front row seat to this guy. And I really feel like the things that people are saying about him, it's not hagiography, it's not exaggeration. He was a pain in the neck. He's not like, not like he's a saint. He was a pain in the neck. But he really was what you've been hearing. I feel this is true to the guy. He really was extraordinary. And I just feel grateful that I got the front row seat. And again, thank you guys all for coming. And we have this room for a while more, so eat and drink and be merry. And Eric would love this event, so thank you for coming.